So this is going to be a slightly different style of video to the videos that I normally make, in that it's not going to be scripted. Okay, normally I sit down, I write a long script, whereas today it's going to be a bit more conversational, and that's simply because I just haven't had the time. I haven't had the time to sit down and write a script, and I won't have the time to do any editing. So we're going straight in there. Maybe it's nice. Maybe it's nice sometimes just to put the camera on and just have a straight up conversation with you. I had a comment recently on one of my YouTube videos. I think it was on a YouTube video about the board game industry, an old one. But this comment I thought had quite a lot in it that maybe I like to reply to comments, right? But there was quite a lot to write, and I thought, well, actually, that could be a video. Why not? Why not just voice my opinions on camera? And the question says, I have a board game that I created, but I can't find anyone to back it or get it started. I don't have any money to make it myself, so what do I do now? You would think that companies would jump at the chance to get a new game on store shelves, so why does it take years to get a game on the market? Even Kickstarter takes money, but I don't have any money. So what do I do with my game now? How do I get a game tester to test my game when I only have one homemade copy of my game and I don't have any money to get a prototype made? I'm Adam Porter, I'm a board game designer. I like to talk about my own experiences of making board games, getting board games published, as well as reviewing games and the other types of videos that you'll have seen on the channel. I thought this was quite an interesting question. It's not dissimilar to the questions that I often get. Okay, so I do frequently get emails and comments from viewers who say, well, I've got this board game, I've got this great idea, but I can't seem to get anybody interested. I can't seem to get it made. And I actually made a video previously called How to Get Your Game Published, or Getting Published, or something like that. I'll put a link to it. And that was supposed to be my answer, right? If I get these constant emails, I find it quite nice to be able to just provide them a link rather than having to write out the same thing every time. Give them a link. Here's a video I've made on that topic. And on this channel you'll find videos on virtually every topic. Frankly, every question you might have, I'll probably have covered it in a video about board game design. But I thought there was something a bit more interesting in this question, in the references to not having much money. And it made me think a little bit about how, you know, when we're designing games, that there's a degree of sort of privilege that goes into this, right? In terms of you've got to have a fair amount of income in order to be able to sustain it. Or do you? Can you do it on an absolute minimal budget? Is that possible? So let's start with the first statement. I have a board game that I created, but I can't find anyone to back it or get it started. So my question there to the viewer would be, what have you done to try to find somebody to back it, to try to find somebody to get it started? Without knowing that, it's hard to know how realistic and all-encompassing that statement is. Okay, it is possible to get people interested in your game if your game is good enough, and if your approach is professional and you know, and slick enough, basically. How do we approach people? We do it by email. Email costs nothing, right? I've got videos that I've made previously. I made a video about how to make a video, a promo video for your board game design. That's worth looking at. It doesn't cost you anything. Sounds like it should, doesn't it? But it doesn't really. If you've got a smartphone, which I think probably most people will have a smartphone, or just a phone with a camera on it, that's all you need, really. A phone with a camera on it and a computer. If you've got those things, then you don't need much more. So you can make a video, you can make a sell sheet. I've got a video on how to make a sell sheet. Again, you don't need anything fancy for that. You just need a computer and put in the work in terms of learning how to do it. You can follow my video, that will give you a good guide. And then you put that into a pleasant email, keep it brief. All this stuff is covered in my Getting Published video. And then you send that to publishers. But you've got to also do some work in terms of researching which publishers to send it to. That means looking at game stores, websites, looking at your own games, working out who the publishers are that make the sort of game that you're making. Also looking at, do they make games all by the same person? So is everything done in-house, or are they working with outside designers? And then pitching the game around and expecting to get minimal in the way of returns. Okay, if you send out, you know, if I send out I don't know, 20, 30 emails around the time of a convention, I'll probably get about half of them might come back to me. Some of those might be saying, no, I'm not interested. Some of them might be saying, yes, I'm happy to have a meeting. Now, of course, one of the issues here is if you've got very low budget, then actually going to a convention is going to be an issue for you. That's a privilege, isn't it? I don't have vast amounts of money. Let's start from there, right? I've got a full-time job and it pays me pretty well. And so as a result, I can afford to make prototypes and I can afford to go to conventions, right? If I want to go to Essen each year, it's a fair amount of money, but I can afford to do it. That said, I don't have enough money to launch a Kickstarter. Okay, a Kickstarter, you have to have enough money to get some artwork in place, probably to make some sort of video, promotional video, and I'm talking about a different style of promotional video to what we're talking about when pitching to publishers. Here we need something that does look professional and slick, not just made on our smartphone, if we want to get decent returns from that Kickstarter. I don't have that money to invest. I would feel terrible putting thousands and thousands of pounds into a risky Kickstarter project at the expense of my family and all the rest of it. There's another degree of privilege, the people who are able to invest that money into their Kickstarters. If you don't have money, then Kickstarter's probably not the sensible route for you, okay? If you don't have money, you're probably looking down that publisher route. And the good thing is, these days you don't need to go to conventions, okay? I still think conventions is the best route. I think it gives you an advantage, but in the COVID world, okay, a lot of stuff is done online, and I don't think that's going away, right? Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Skype, you can have conversations with publishers via all these things, Discord. You can go down these routes in order to pitch your games to publishers. Okay, question number 2. You would think that companies would jump at the chance to get a new game on store shelves, so why does it take years to get a game on the market? Well, I think that's where the misconception is. Basically, companies are not, as you've experienced, companies are not desperate to get games onto game store shelves. They're not desperate to hear your idea or my idea or anyone else's idea. Why is that? Let's rewind maybe 6, 7, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. Game publishers were trying to make tons of games. They were filling up their catalogues with games. They were throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what stuck. And that was quite nice as a game designer, because you could go there, you could pitch your game, they may well take it on. Okay, and it was very exciting, but then it was disappointing when you found that actually the support for those games was minimal. The money, the rewards that came back from it was minimal because they didn't sell, because maybe those were the games that didn't stick. And yes, there would be the games that sort of powered through and became the evergreen titles that the publishers really, really supported. So it sort of worked, okay, but it was always a little bit disappointing. Over recent years, the general consensus has been make fewer games. There are so many games coming out, thousands of games each year. If you go to Essen Spiel in the autumn in Germany, there are literally over 1,000 games released each year at that convention. The market cannot sustain that many games. And so sensible publishers now have pulled back. They're producing fewer games and they're making sure they really focus on the good, high quality games that have a really good chance in the market. They're supporting those games and trying to sort of turn them into evergreen titles. That seems like a more sustainable business model than the throw everything at the wall model. And what that means is that an awful lot of good games don't get made because it's not good enough. To be good, you've got to be exceptional at this point. So what does that mean for us as designers? It means that we've got to look not just at creating a game that we enjoy, that our playtesters enjoy, but actually looking at the market and recognizing what it needs right now. What's missing right now? Where's the gap? Okay, there's no new themes. They've all been done. There's no new mechanisms. That's probably not quite true. Hopefully there are new mechanisms, but they're not discovered all that often, right? Most games that come out reuse mechanisms that have been used before. So if your big focus is on finding something brand new, I think you're going to be disappointed. What you're looking for is what's not happening right now that could be a hit. Okay, how can I build on the trends that I've seen? How can I anticipate the trends that are coming? And how can I create a game that people are going to want to play and people are going to want to buy. So the next question is, how do I get a game tester to test my game when I only have one homemade copy? Well, I mean, that can be difficult. Presumably, if you're making games, it means that you're into the board game hobby, you're playing lots of games with lots of different people. If you're not, then that's probably your next step, is trying to get out to gaming groups and getting to know other gamers in your local area. If you don't have obvious groups around you, it may mean traveling a little bit, and of course that comes at a cost as well. But if you can get out to gaming groups, if you can develop those gaming relationships, then those gamers that you play with, they can become your playtesters. Okay, it's not ideal. Obviously, ideally, you want people to test your game who aren't your friends. And I think sometimes that's about reaching out to people that you don't know at those gaming meetups, even getting to conventions that have playtesting sections in them. So for example, I at UK Games Expo, I always try and make the most of the playtesting zone there, because it's a really good opportunity to get a wide range of different ages and styles of gamers playing my games and giving me feedback that I wouldn't get from my local group. Now, a lot of games can be played online. Okay, you can put together a prototype on, for example, Tabletop Simulator. Tabletop Simulator, obviously you've got to pay to download that software, but it's very cheap software, and it's much cheaper than making a physical homemade prototype. If you can put your files up onto that and create a digital version of your game, which just takes a little bit of learning, watching some YouTube videos. It's not hard to do. You can create a digital version of your game, and now you've got a game that you can play with people no matter where they are in the world. Get involved in online forums, Board Game Geek, Twitter groups, Facebook groups. There's lots of design groups on Facebook that I would really highly recommend. Board Game Design Lab community I find is a really, really good one. And you can find playtesters through these routes. And then play your game digitally. You do need to test it a lot in order to, I mean, one of the things that's mentioned in this question is that you're thinking about going to Kickstarter and self-publishing and you're looking for backers, but then you indicate that actually you haven't play tested a huge amount. You haven't been able to. So it sounds like you've done things in the wrong order there. You want to do an awful lot of play testing, make sure your game is solid and enjoyable and doesn't need any real work before you start pitching it around to people and trying to get them to back it. And then finally, you say that you can't afford to get a physical prototype made. Well, yeah, it comes at a cost, as I say, going to craft stores, buying all the equipment that you need. That's not cheap. Sometimes, as I've shown in a recent video, it is even cheaper or as cheap to get a professional company to make your game, particularly if you're making little card games. I break down the cost in a recent video about using Launch Lab, which is a print-on-demand service from Launch Tabletop, who sponsor some of my videos. So it does come at a cost, of course, making prototypes, but without them, you haven't really got a product. A lot of this is about thinking of yourself as a business. Okay, you can't really go into business without some degree of investment. And I know it's fun, okay? I know it's a hobby for us, okay? It's enjoyable designing games, but at the end of this, we're aiming to get people to actually pay money to purchase these products. And we kind of owe it to those people to take a business-like approach to this, to treat it as a professional sort of endeavor. Now, that doesn't mean you need to spend a fortune on it, but it does mean you need to do your research, do the work, probably invest a little bit of money in it, in order to get yourself up and running. So the only remaining point to cover is the question, so what do I do with my game now? And I think this is where you have to reflect, okay? You're going to need to look back at your experiences with this game, and you're going to need to think, what went well? What didn't go so well? What could I have done differently? What have I learnt? What would I do differently in the future? What can I take from this game? What are the positives that I can build on? Right? Now, most of us, our first games, in fact, I'd say virtually all of us, our first games are not our best work, and our first games are probably not publishable. Certainly mine weren't. I made a video about this recently, making your first game. My first, I don't know how many prototypes, 10? maybe not quite that many, maybe 5, 6, 7 games were not anything like the quality that they would need to be in order to be published. And I didn't know it at the time, okay? But it was true. They weren't good enough. Now, they went on the shelf. I haven't thrown them away. I can revisit them, and I do frequently revisit them and try and look at them through new eyes as somebody with experience in the industry, and ask myself, is there something that I can build on here? Because I still have huge nostalgia for those experiences of designing those games. I still love those games. I would like to be able to turn them into something marketable. But until I can see that, until I can see their place in the industry, they won't be pitched anywhere. Okay, they need work. They need serious work to get them there. A painter's first drawing, first illustration is not going up in some art museum, right? A novelist's first story that they write is not going anywhere other than on their mum's fridge. And it's the same for board game design. Your first game is probably not terribly good, and that's okay. You can build on that, you can use that, you can learn from those experiences. If publishers don't want your game, if they're not interested, then the chances are that buyers aren't going to be interested either. Okay, so there's your guide. Okay, it's a form of playtesting, right? It's not the best form of playtesting in terms of, as an industry move, but you've got people looking at your game and giving you feedback, and the feedback coming back to you from those publishers who are experts is not entirely positive. Maybe it's time to move on and learn. Okay, and build a catalogue of games, a portfolio of games. Right, that was a bit of a rant, bit of a ramble. Feels a bit odd to me because I haven't done these sorts of videos for a long time now. It's been a few years since I sat down and just talked to camera. But hopefully it's been useful to some of you out there. Please do go back and watch my old videos, okay? I've got loads of videos on the channel about board game design, about all aspects of it, okay? So go back and watch lots of those and they should answer lots of your questions. I may make more videos like this over the coming weeks because I've got a busy sort of period ahead. But if not, well, I'll be doing my usual scripted, edited stuff. Just might take a little bit longer for it to come out than usual. So thanks very much for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe, all the usual things, share the video, and I'll see you next time. Until then, all the best.